so.
What's the whole? Okay. I'm on vacation, I'm, no, right.
I'm so done with him.
Hey, excuse me, you said we're not live, right?
Good morning and welcome to the May 15th, 2024 Finance Committee meeting. We do not have a quorum of Finance Committee members, so we will not be able to approve our last meeting's minutes, so we'll roll those over until our next Finance Committee meeting. So we'll just jump straight into the agenda and Title I funding.
Good morning. So Title I funding this morning will be shared by Ms. Sukanik, the Director of Title I Funding. As well, we have one presentation from Academic Affairs. We also have Dr. Keener, who will be sharing with you the SPED information as it relates to the funding sources that we receive from state and federal grants. But wanted to first address, there were some questions as it related to school counselors. Our Director of School Counseling, Ms. McGuire, is handling today all things graduation right now as we are in the home stretch. And so wanted to bring that information to you briefly as it related to LPCs, I believe is the question that was asked, and wanted to share more information around that. So our Wellness Center Coordinator, Dr. Kim Jackson Allen, is an actual LPC, as well as one other wellness counselor. We have 4 schools that have counselors that are also licensed professional counselors. We have 1 at Isle of Hope, 2 at Coastal, and 1 at Beach. Currently, the district is operating 2 cohorts for counselors to obtain the LPC, to become LPC, licensed professional counselors. 1 cohort began in June of 2023. The other actually started in October of 2023. And that's comprised of 11 counselors. This is a 3-year process for those counselors. Funding is through the American Rescue Plan, as well as a partnership with Chatham County Narcotics. We actually have a $25,000 per year grant from Chatham County Narcotics. And on average, it costs about $2,000 per month to provide supervision, which has to occur for 6 of those LPC trainees. One of our wellness counselors is actually the person who is providing the training and the supervision and the instruction for the cohort. So continuing, our LPCs can provide therapeutic strategies, which are very different from school-based counseling strategies for students. It is not recommended that all school-based counselors engage in this practice. And I've included a chart here for you to show the differences from school counselors versus licensed professional counselors. And you can see the things that occur when our school-based counselors are working in the school setting as opposed to LPCs who can enter into the realm of providing services that are more therapeutic. And so with our school counselors, they proactively enhance awareness of mental health through the school. And on the therapeutic side of things, it's more of an individualized approach that includes goals specific to the patient and that concern. Our school counselors promote positive, healthy behaviors for all of the students in our schools. And then with the therapeutic side, that typically involves monthly or weekly appointments being scheduled for those services to be provided. Our school counselors provide strategies and support with the goal of assisting the student into returning or acclimating back into the classroom. And then on the therapeutic side, the LPCs function when they're in that realm, more assisting clients and working through their family, domestic issues, suicidal ideation, trauma, eating disorders, self-injury, those type areas. What we do recommend is, because we have the Wellness Center and you see the others, that when school counselors identify any of these areas, our families want referrals, or there's someone else in the school, you refer to the Wellness Center. The Wellness Center's intent when it was established was for these LPCs to work from that area under the supervision of an LPC who has been doing this for some time, which is our coordinator and our LPC counselor, and they can provide extended services in some of these areas through the Wellness Center as opposed to in the school daily. So these things can be identified in the school and then referred to the Wellness Center where you have the LPCs to provide that additional support.
Thank you. Ms. Ball-Oliver, in this process where the school counselor is engaged in a conversation that is revealing the need for these other supports, do they also suggest the use of EAP, employee assistance programs that parents may have and may have access to that have free counseling associated with it?
Yes, so they do. They actually recommend that, you can actually outsource, as you said. I will tell you that when we first established this, coming back from COVID, it was very difficult to get those services. We had students that could not be seen because there were so many appointments, not just within our school, but in the community as a whole. And so that was a part of why we developed the Wellness Center, as well as we had a number of students that we were seeing that needed serious threat assessments. And so we were able to actually, through that center, do those assessments and get students back in school a lot quicker than when they were waiting on maybe some private or some public assistance because they were overwhelmed in the system as well.
That's helpful to know. I didn't know that about the local in-person counseling. Some of the programs that I've seen people access, of course, there's the explosion of virtual appointments and private platforms that sell those services. But I've seen the EAP programs that are virtual, that provide support completely in a virtual format and may not have that same restriction. May not be overbooked like the local supports may be.
And we do utilize some of those services as well in terms of referring out to them as well.
Okay. I think it's, not to belabor it, I just think it's important to mention it because sometimes parents don't know what all their benefits are till they need one. You don't know you get a discount at the store until you go to the store and somebody says, hey, you get a discount. Or you don't know what's part of your medical coverage in terms of all of those things. And so if our team can say there are resources out there you may be paying for that you don't know about, it may make them go into their, insurance coverage for those parents who do have insurance, and may make them go look at their benefits and see if it's there.
And I will say that our wellness team, that is part of the role because they don't provide, as we said, all of these services. That would require a bit more as it relates to authority and being given to them in terms of what LPCs actually do. And so that's when they counsel with families. Sometimes they do have to refer them and here's what you can and can't receive, or here's who you need to check with in terms of what benefits you might have. So they do also refer them to, other services and then help them navigate that process.
Mr. Moss and then Dr. Howard Hall.
So we have 11 counselors that are in the program now, right?
Yes.
So they started in 20, so they won't finish until 26?
Correct.
Perfect, okay.
Yes, good morning, and you sunshine this morning with the yellow on, you look nice.
Thank you.
I just want to ask, I know there can be a thin line sometimes between counseling and the therapy. So is it sometimes problematic for counselors that they don't actually cross over and interfere with the therapeutic piece since it's so closely related in some instances?
So we recommend, yes, that not occur. I will tell you that if given the authority, LPCs can diagnose and actually provide therapy. That is not their authority in the school setting, and we don't recommend that be the case, but that, yes, LPCs can do that, but that's not what we recommend, as you just said, crossing over into that school realm and doing that.
The four that we have currently are housed at those schools, but I'm guessing work across the district, correct? The
So
four
they are school
LPCs?
counselors.
The four LPCs, so they're LPCs at those schools, but then they are not called upon to be LPCs for other schools then?
No, they are not.
Okay,
We
so at
don't-
other schools, those school-based counselors are then just referring out?
Yes, they can refer to the Wellness Center, and those LPCs were hired as school-based counselors. Those were the roles that they took on. I'll use Dr. Jackson Allen. Prior to becoming the wellness coordinator, she was an LPC. She was the head counselor at Beach High School. And she took that role, and she holds that certification. So those four counselors are the school counselors for Isle of Hope, Beach, and Coastal. They just happen to also hold the LPC certification.
Just
And
forward.
they can work at the Wellness Center because we do contract with some of our counselors who have the LPCs. So they could actually be on work agreement and provide some services, but it would be through the Wellness Center.
Is it our desire, I don't know, as a board or as a district, is it our desire to try to have an LPC? I know every school way too hard, but spread more across the district to where they might be able to cover multiple schools? I don't know. This would be a future discussion. Somebody put a pin in it somewhere that's better than me to see if that's where we should be going. We don't have an LPC here, do we?
No.
Not with us
I
today?
can-
No? Okay.
No.
Just to pick their mind. Because we talk about mental health, I mean, probably every board meeting, and definitely in between every board meeting. So I don't know if that's cost prohibitive, what that would look like, just finding those individuals, training up those individuals to better help both our employees, but also our students. So, yes, let's put that a pin in that. Yes, what you got, Dr. Hassenbrand?
Well, I have a response to your question, but Mr. Moss had his hand up first.
So right now, we only have an LPC at Beach, correct? As far as high schools?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think you asked a difficult question. I would like for us as a district to aspire to get what we need, find out how much it costs, and let's get it and pay for it for everyone who needs it. That's a big number across all different operational areas, but I always want to push to, if that's what we need, let's get it. But here's the challenge with doing that in the case of LPCs, is that we've had some board members talk about what are the roles and the supports that families should be giving, and what are the roles of the schoolhouse when they get there. And we know what happens in the schoolhouse is affected by what's happening in other places. So I don't mind at all that overlap of role, because there are some young people who need that, and some very successful young people who wouldn't be where they are if somebody didn't get out of their lane and support them. But once we do it, and once we do it, we'll never be able to pull it back. That's why we have a budget approaching $1 billion, because we're like, oh, this is a good idea. We ought to do this. This is important. Look how it has affected student growth. Awesome. We'll never be able to pull back from our role in mental health supports if we do that. But I still think it's something that we should endeavor to do. I would love to see counseling in every school. But if we do that, the demand will never shrink because we put it there. The demand will only grow because people need it.
Ms. Kowalski?
Ms. Paul Oliver's never going to get through her presentation at this rate. But quickly, I think it's worth exploring what that cost would be. I think to have an LPC in every school is a great, aspirational goal that's worth evaluating. I'd really like to see us look at upstream solutions more so, though. What are the resources that we can put into our schools to try and minimize mental health? Some of them are going to transpire no matter what, but I think that really focusing on upstream solutions is where I'd like to see us focus our resources. And I think there's some things that we can do that we've talked about before, but that's not.
So I will also say, remember that this is a commitment from counselors who wish to do this. And if you look at this slide, and there's a very specific reason it is not recommended that all school-based counselors engage in this practice. They do go through a process to determine those counselors that would be best suited for this. So that might not be a wish for everyone. Dr. Hoskins Brown talked about some virtual services. So it may be that that's a route to explore that could be a part of that. But keep in mind that the Wellness Center operates during the school day as well as after hours. And so that could be the referral source and the hub, which would allow for you not to expand it so much into every school, but to invest in those that can provide services. You can do a rotational, some type of special schedule, so that they're always available during the day. Also, I think part of the reason why that thought is there is that, remember, if given the authority when you're talking LPCs, they can actually diagnose, provide therapy. That could really entail developing and implementing a treatment plan based on the diagnosis. And remember that in the school setting, they're hired as school counselors, which would deviate from that work as well and puts us in another realm. And I'm sure legal would like to weigh in on that part of it, because LPCs, if needed, could actually have someone involuntarily committed. So you just really want to be careful about that role and maybe think about just making sure it's concentrated where it can be monitored at a higher level at the Wellness Center.
Last comment.
I'm so sorry. I just want to clear something up. The Wellness Center is open all the time, even if, like, when the kids are out on break. Is the Wellness Center open or not?
So you can make referrals. I do not want to stand here and tell you they are 250 days, because off the top of my head, I cannot remember. But knowing Kim McGuire, she is watching this text and will provide me with the answer to that question
Thank you.
before we leave.
Thank you.
Can't remember if they're 229 or 250. At this time, I'm going to ask that the Director of Compensatory Education, Ms. Sue Connick, please come and share with you Title I, how we are funded and how we receive those monies and how it's calculated and how we utilize them. And then she'll be followed by Dr. Keener for special education.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Today, I'm going to discuss Title I Part A, Title III, Title IV Part A, and then the homeless and McKinney-Vento grants. So Title I Part A funding, the state gets their poverty numbers from the U.S. Census, and that's how they determine how much money each district gets. The purpose of Title I is to give every child a fair opportunity at equitable and high-quality education, and then to also close those achievement gaps. LEAs must serve schools within the LEA attendance area in which the percentage of children from low-income families is at least as high as the percentage of children from low-income families served by the LEA as a whole. So our percentages are for high school, we serve down to 70%, and then elementary, middle, and K-8, we serve down to 65%. So as long as we do not serve a school outside of those percentages, then we're meeting that requirement. Or we can change our percentages. LEAs, so what we do every, it's usually February, March, we have the free and reduced lunch numbers, and we put in the new numbers into our chart, and then we do the percentages from highest to lowest. And using those percentages, we just keep plugging in different amounts per pupil. We'll usually start with, like, the highest percentages, we'll get about 800, 850, and then we just keep either increasing those numbers or decreasing those numbers as we move down the line, or, I'm sorry, increasing or decreasing so we can get to the total that we need for all the schools. What we have to be careful in grade bands is if we have a elementary school that is 80% poverty, and we give them $500 per child, we cannot give the elementary school that has a 70% poverty $600. So we have to make sure that the higher poverty schools get the higher per pupil allocations. And then this year, like we have done, I think, for the last 4 years, we had to do a rezoning worksheet because of the long-range plan. So we had to look at, Heather DiTomaso sent us a list of where everybody is going for next year, but then we had to take that list and act like they already moved in October 2023 when the FTE count number was received. So it was a lot of movement, some hair pulling out and arguments. But we finally got to the point that we are comfortable with the numbers that we have, and we know they are correct. So that was completed this year. Title I funds have to be allocated to our participating private schools. So every October, we have a consultation with every private school is invited. All the grant fund directors of all their different, or coordinators of all their different grants speak. It's like a 90-slide PowerPoint that the state puts together that we have to use. And so then after that, the private schools are given the opportunity to choose which grants they would like to receive funds from. So we have, I think, 8 schools that receive Title I funding, and then we have, I believe it's 14 that get Title IV funding. And some of the Title I ones also get Title IV. So for Title I, Savannah-Chatham County for this school year had 17,356 students in Title I schools, and then there were 143 students eligible students in private schools. So the district, we received $18,440,135 in Title I funds. So from that total, off the top, we have to take out the $151,209 because that will be allocated to the private schools. And we do a survey each year with the private schools, and the surveys have to be filled out to see which students fall within the poverty level, and those are the ones that the school receives funds from. And it can only be students in the private schools that live in the attendance zone of a Title I school. So if the child lives in the attendance zone of May Howard, then that school will not get any money for that child because that May Howard is not a Title I school. So for Title III, Godot provides funding based on the number of EL students we have, and that number is reported in March during the FTE data collections report. And there are required activities that have to do for the English language learner subgrant. So we have to provide effective and supplemental language instruction. We have to provide professional development for the teachers, administrators, and other school personnel. We have to provide and implement parent and family community engagement activities that will enhance the Title III funded language activities. So for Title III, the original allocation this year was $314,230. Carryover allocation was $71,240. So in order to get those funds, we have to write an EL program plan. The plan must fulfill all of those requirements that I had in the previous slide, but it also must reference all the items that we're going to place in the budget, because if it's not in the plan, you can't put it in your budget, and they will send your budget back. The state has really moved towards, with this grant in the last couple years, and really strict about it this year, is that these funds should not be used on, instructional supplies or a lot of instructional resources. It should be more towards professional development and family literacy classes. So for FY25, that's where the majority of that money is going. And I can see the look on your face, so I think I'm about to answer a question you might have. So how do we help those Title III classrooms? Title I money can be used to supplement your EL population at your school if you're a Title I school. I know also, I'm not sure if it got passed, but there was discussion about providing funding to the Title III schools for that reason, to be able to get some supplies and resources. I'm hoping that they still allow us to do the software, because we do purchase IXL for the ESWL classrooms. So hopefully that can still go in the budget, and then it will be the professional development and the literacy classes for parents. So Title IV Part A is the Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grant. There are 3, we still call them buckets. I think they've changed the name of them, but in our department, they're still buckets. Well-rounded education, so this should support activities that are around your academic classes, foreign language, fine arts, health and physical education, and career technical education. Safe and healthy students is we want to create a safe and supportive learning environment for the students. An effective use of technology. This is deceiving now, because this makes you think, oh, I can purchase technology with this grant. No, you can provide professional development to teachers on how to better use the technology in their classroom. And if we do that, then we could, like if we're providing professional development on using iPads in the classroom, then we could spend a little bit of money on iPads for the teachers to use in the classroom. So it's not just a technology grant. Title IV Part A funding, this year our allocation was $1,415,782. Of that, $123,617 was allocated to private schools. $50,771 was allocated to Coastal Empire, Susie King, Savannah Classical, and TEMA. Oglethorpe did not request a Title IV fund, so they can use whatever we do with our Title I funds, they can be part of. So the allocation for Title IV is not based on poverty, but it's based on the total number of students in the schools. And so this is where some of the private schools that don't have a high poverty level can still get a lot of money through Title IV, because they have a very high school population. So this benefits them in a way of getting more money than it would Title I. So for Title IV, what they do is they add up all the students in our district, add up all the students in the participating private schools, and they take the dollar amount that they're going to give us, they divide that, and we get a per pupil amount, which this year was $36.37. So the private schools get that for every child that they have. Our charter schools get that for every child they have, and then we get that for every child we have in the district. So our district funds funds 4 teacher specialists, 3 learning specialists, and 2 MTSS RTI specialists. And then we also provide them some resources to deliver professional development to teachers and school staff. Yes, ma'am.
Just a question about all of these programs. Since they're federal programs and the state is a pass-through, like, does the state have leeway on the funding allocation, or do they just take what they get from the feds and pass it through to the districts?
Well, the same way that they find the per pupil for us with like Title IV, they find the per pupil for the state, and then every district will get that per pupil amount for the number of students they had in their district.
The total bucket that goes across the entire state, is that number set by what the state gets from the feds?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the state is really just acting as a direct pass-through to the local districts?
Yeah, and they probably take out a small chunk for their operating.
administration, yeah.
Yeah, but yes. And so my last grant is the McKinney-Vento funds. So Title I Part A funding requires that each LEA have a approved plan for McKinney-Vento homeless students. It must include how we are going to identify the students, services that we're going to provide to the homeless students. We make sure that they have comparable services for children who attend the non-Title I schools. So this is just not, McKinney-Vento is just not about Title I schools, it's about every school in the district. We must have a McKinney-Vento liaison. We have to remove the barriers to enrollment and retention of children that are experiencing homelessness. We must provide transportation to students experiencing homelessness. And then we have to make sure that the data that's collected on enrolled students is accurate and correct that we send to the state. So this is a competitive grant that's available to LEAs with a large number of children experiencing homelessness. So every year Sharon Hill gathers that data and she'll send it to the state to show how many students we have that are homeless. This year, there's been 1,048 students that have been identified for this school year, and currently 834 students are enrolled right now. So some of that difference between the 1,048 and the 834 could have transferred out and moved somewhere else. So this year, we were awarded $163,988. We use that to pay the salary of the McKinney-Vento case manager, which is Monica Daughtry. We have tutorial funds, supply kits, backpacks. We have, I think there was about 4 seniors that received their cap and gown this year they didn't have to pay for. And then we have 2 other people in that department, Sharon Hill and Lestania Cox, and they're paid through our consolidated admin funds through Title I. I think that's it for me. Oh, I don't know how to go back. Any questions?
Yeah, Dr. Howard Hall?
The question I just want to bring out the point about private schools that a lot of people don't understand. I know you went over most of it, but once those funds have been allocated, any student living in that attendance zone can be served regardless of their income. So say if one school earned $5,000 based on those students that qualified for free and reduced lunch. However, if students live in that Title I attendance zone and they did not qualify for free and reduced lunch, they can still receive the services.
Yes,
I know
so if
it's kind
there's-
of confusing when you try to explain it, but that's why a lot of private schools take advantage of it. So if they have a high population of students that may have attended a Title I school if they didn't, attend that private school, and although they're not qualifying for free and reduced lunch, they can still be served if they target that particular grade level or whatever the case may be. Looking at the list, and I see the new schools that are coming on, would they come on as TA? Are they still doing that, or it's changed now that they're going to be school-wide from the
Well,
beginning?
last year, we had 4 new schools come on, and we were able to put them all as school-wide. I will work the same this year to get all the ones, because we do have Coastal Empire, Savannah, e-learning, and Coastal Harbor have been Title I in the past. But Hess, Jenkins, and New Hampstead, K-8, have not been, and Jenkins, I'm sorry, have not been Title I in the past, but we will work to get them school-wide this year, especially like some of the money with New Hampstead and Jenkins, I believe Hess too, the dollar amount that those schools are getting is high because they have high populations. So their per pupil is multiplied by more students. And to be a TA with that large sum of money is difficult to spend. So it would be better if they're school-wide. I do have someone that works on a TEC that works with these schools right now so that they can get their staffing done, that they can work with them on the budget, and then also work with them on their school improvement plan so that way everything is ready to go and we can submit to the state for them to be school-wide.
Could you talk about the grandfather for Groves? I see that, I've never known it'd be a grandfather clause on per pupil.
I didn't either until I read something, and we've never done it before. Groves, with the rezoning, Groves' percentage came up to like 69 point, no, yeah, high school's down to 70. So it came up to like 69.4, I think it is. Yeah, and I just felt like they needed to be grandfathered because I think once you do the FTE in October of next year, I think it's going to show that they have a higher poverty percentage than the 69.4. You can only grandfather for 1 year. So, I've already talked to Dr. Robinson that she needs to get her lunch forms in to make sure that she can maintain that for the following year. But I just, after I read about it, I was like, this would be a good fit for Groves. No one else was close in coming into being grandfathered. So it just keeps them in for 1 year, and hopefully the percentage will go up and they'll still be in there on a regular basis.
Dr. Oxens-Brown.
Thank you, Ms. Sakani. I appreciate this presentation and learned a lot in some of the information. I'm thinking about efficiencies in all of the different moving parts that you described and all the different grants. They fund this particular activity. It's funded based on a need, like there's a need to do this for these learners. And so I have kind of a 30,000-foot question about it. In university settings, you often have an Office of Sponsored Research Administration that makes sure that for that organization, all the grants coming in are working together or at least compliant with the rules of the organization and that sort of thing. And often there's a person in that office that makes sure that there's not overpromising happening for what the institution can do. And in the best case scenario, looks for synergy, because everybody has to get their grant into that office and that person reviews it to see what connections there are. So my question for you is, based on how I observed how we moved with technology during the pandemic, we turned over every stone. We looked at all of our activities to see how we could get to one-to-one technology. We had our East Plus money, we had our goals with our general fund, and we got there very, very quickly.
Yes, ma'am.
So we were very efficient in looking for synergy and efficiencies. Do we do that, or how do we do that with the federal grants? Is that you? Is that what you do? Are you the wizard behind the curtain in green, making sure that all these things, like, do we do that?
I wish I was a wizard.
The wizard
some
in
days.
pink and yellow.
I don't have enough hours in my day some days.
But is that kind of a goal in administering these grants, is making sure that we are really using them as efficiently as possible, or is that just not humanly possible because they have so many moving parts?
Because we are one-to-one, and a lot of that came from eSPLOS and ARP, right now, and it will, the principals have not heard this yet, because I need to meet with Carl Eller, because he gave my data analyst a call, and we need to all have a conversation. Title I funds should not be buying any technology this coming school year. We are one-to-one, and that would be supplanting. So we are in contact with technology. They were putting up the ViewSonic boards. I was told, don't let elementary school buy anymore because we're putting those in, and then we moved to middle school and high school. So I am in communication with them. We do work closely with Title II with our private schools, because a lot of the information that we have to get with Title I and Title IV is the same information that Title II needs to get. So I do have a program specialist that goes out with Donnie Davis when they go out and do consultations at the beginning of year, so that those principals or directors at the schools understand how all this money works together for them, and it's not hearing separate things at separate times. So there is some coordination. I may be a wizard every once in a while, but I just work with a fabulous, fabulous team. Everybody knows their roles, and they take them seriously, and they do them well. But yeah, it's kind of a little magic behind the scene, but always making sure we're in compliance. Yes.
I would just like to say thank you. Thank you for saying that McKenty-Vento is competitive. I did not know that we had to fight for that money, which just is absurd. And thank you for figuring out that we can bolster it up with Title I money as well. In the future, if we could, together with the district and with your department, look at what it would mean to be a Title I district. We've discussed that a bunch. I know it was one of those things. What?
I remember we had that conversation within the past year, and there were some real downsides.
We haven't had, we've had conversations. We have not had a pro-con. I have not seen a big screen with pros and cons and what it would cost or what it wouldn't. And I would like, in a future finance committee meeting, for that to be a discussion moving forward.
That would have to be an even bigger meeting, because it's not so much that we'd be a Title I district, because not all our schools need Title I funds, or should, I don't want to say shouldn't get Title I, but they don't need them as the other high poverty. I think what we're looking at is whether or not we do CEP, which would really bring in the school nutrition department, because they get everything then through direct cert, and then it's percentages from there. At one point, I did run some numbers, and there were some schools that would fall off the Title I list. But then I learned that you can group certain schools together so that the percentages help out, so that, you get a low percentage with a high percentage school, and they even themselves out. Because and what I've been told in the past is that we need to be at least above 60 or 65% in direct cert, where the school nutrition department will not be losing money. That would allow everybody to be free breakfast, free lunch, but then also not have school nutrition lose money. So it's not just about Title I, there's the CEP picture that we would need to have a discussion with.
Yeah, so
and
that
include
is
school
what, so
nutrition.
you are wizarding right now.
Hey!
So if we can continue that wizardry and bring in the other wizards of those departments to let, because we get constituents that hear about these things from other districts. Why can't we just flip over to this and get free breakfast and free lunch? And, that sounds great when somebody brings it up to you. But to see the machination of it and all the moving parts, pros and cons, if we could have that in some meeting, and maybe that's an informal session, because it's going to bring in more than just but it is finances, so I'm fine with it being in one of our later finance meetings as well. So put a big pin in that, a nail.
Wasn't that also a lunch application issue? Somehow I remember 2 or 3 years ago, maybe even longer, that was presented to us by leadership in school nutrition. I don't know if Michael, do you remember that? Because we were talking about, we were so close to maybe being able to be a free lunch district, and then there was something that we didn't do. We weren't trying very hard at it, but we were close, and it was suggested to us, and then that's when the suggestion came. Does
Yeah, it was
anybody
about
remember?
4 years ago, in a budget committee meeting. We had school nutrition come in, and they said that the numbers for applications were down, and continually going down, and that's why we weren't able to hit some certain numbers for that. With that, I know that all the schools in the district have been trying to get more of the applications for those people who do qualify for it, to get those applications in, so we can actually have real numbers, so we are able to get those federal funds. But yeah, that was about 3.5, 4 years ago in a budget committee meeting.
Thank you. But what you guys just said there was some other things. So is it not just the applications? Are the applications like a minima? I don't know,
But for the
Mr. Jackson,
direct
if you remember
cert, they
this at all.
look at, I believe they look at the applications, and they look at students on, families on TANF, Medicaid, and something else for the direct cert. And that brings all that number in. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't remember it all, but I would like to hear that, have that conversation too, Dr. Brinkman. And I'm wondering if another issue with it was, we've talked about the cost of our food, and we serve higher quality food. And if you ask the kids, they won't say that we do. You ask my son, he doesn't say that we do. But the choices that are available for the quality food that we purchase, we choose more premium choices in some categories. And I don't know if that also affects that full reimbursement rate. So whenever we have that conversation, it would be good to know.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As she comes to the stand, our Wellness Center is open for 219 days, which leads us partially into completing summer school. They are 219 employees.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So, wanted to talk about the special education grants. We have 8 special education grants. The IDEA flow through, the IDEA preschool, the state preschool, the high cost grant, Rule 10, the parent mentor grant, and GNETs, and there's a state and a federal GNETs. In order to receive these grant funds, districts must submit a comprehensive plan of special education and related services to include students that are parentally placed in private schools, home schools, and students with disabilities who are in our local jails in Chatham County. Our total students with disabilities ages 3 through 21 is 5,198, and that is students that are ages 3 through 21. 858 of those are some of our youngest learners who are ages 3 through 5, and then 100 of those students are students that are served by our GNETS program. So IDEA federal flow-through funds, these funds are provided for the provision of FAPE to meet student needs and prepare them for successful post-secondary opportunities, also to protect the rights of students and parents, enhance learning opportunities for parents, teachers, paraprofessionals, and instructional staff, provide the district with support services and technical assistance, and to assess and ensure the effectiveness of the district's efforts to educate students with disabilities. There are 3 main fiscal requirements for receiving and using the IDEA IDEA funds. These are maintenance of effort, which requires districts to maintain or spend at least the same amount of state and local funds as the previous year. Excess cost, which is we can only spend funds on the additional or excess cost of educating students with disabilities above the average annual per student expenditures, and we have to supplement, not supplant, using federal, state, and local funds. For the IDEA flow-through grant, this is to provide financial assistance to school districts that provide special education services to students with disabilities ages 3 through 21. For the base payment, the state will first award each district the amount that the agency would have received for FY 1999 if the state had distributed 75% of that grant for that year. And then the way they allocate the additional remaining funds is 85% of any remaining funds are based on the relative numbers of children children enrolled in the district in public and private elementary and secondary schools. SCCPSS's initial allocation for FY24 was $8,802,064. The IDEA preschool grant is very similar. This provides financial assistance to school districts that provide educational services for students with disabilities ages 3 through 5. For the base payment, the state will award the district the amount that they would have received for FY 1997 if the state had distributed 75% of the grant for that year. The allocation of remaining funds is, again, 85% of any remaining funds based on the relative numbers of children enrolled in the public and private elementary and secondary schools in the LEA. SCCPSS's initial allocation for FY24 was $226,879. For the state preschool, states provide financial assistance to school districts who provide educational services to 3- and 4-year-old students with disabilities. The Georgia Department of Education calculates each grant award based on the number of students using the modified QBE formula. And SCCPSS's initial allocation for FY24 was $1,118,529. The high-cost grant, this grant is a reimbursement grant, and it is also a competitive grant. IDEA gives states the option to set aside funding for the creation of a risk pool to support the cost of providing special education services to students who meet that criteria of a high-needs student. The LEAs receive only a portion or a percentage of the requested funds that we, put the application in for. And the award is based on the number of LEAs that have applied across the state. So our award, our percentage that we were awarded was $121,455. The Rule 10 grant, this provides funding to districts for teacher salaries in crisis stabilization programs that are providing specialized services to students with disabilities. In SECPSS, we use this to fund the salary and benefits or portion of that for a special education teacher at Lakeside Crisis Stabilization Center, and that allocation for this year was $90,000. The Parent Mentor Grant, this is grant assist funding for parent mentors for special education. There are matching requirements for this grant that the district has to agree to. The purpose of the Georgia Parent Mentor Partnership Program is to enhance communication, collaboration among families, educators, and communities, and lead to greater success for students with disabilities and increase family engagement. The grant award was for 2 part-time parent mentors in the amount of $36,800. The GNET state and federal grants, these are funds to support the Georgia Network for Educational and Therapeutic Supports, or GNETs, which is comprised of 24 programs that support LEAs. We have our Coastal Georgia Comprehensive Academy, and that's is to support a continuum of services for students ages 5 through 21. Our GNET state allocation was $2,467,030, and the federal grant allocation was $354,421. It is important to note that there is a reduction in the projected allocated funds for FY25 in the amount of $357,882,000. The allocation of special education staff, so there are many different pieces that we consider when looking at allocating school-based staff. The main one is looking at the total number of students with disability per grade level, and the staff needed to maintain maximum class sizes for different disability areas in that grade level. Looking at special education and related service requirement for each student's IEP, disability-specific needs, looking at teacher caseload size, and as well as district staff that are needed to include related services providers and support department that are funded through the flow-through grant as well as the LEA General Fund.
Thank you. I'll start off. The IDA flow-through and the IDA preschool grant are funded at 97 and 99 numbers?
Yes. So it's so that's when we kind of talk about those like non-funded mandates, which it is funded, but it's only funded at like 14% is generally what that comes out to. That money comes to the state, and then the state allocates that percentage. So they do, the remaining allocations after you take out the base, they do look at enrollment and poverty level. But yes, it goes off of the old federal numbers.
Have we, Mr. Jackson, have we ever, maybe somebody's got this spreadsheet somewhere, to see what our cost is to deliver the education to these 5,198 students? I mean, that's a chunk of our district. That's a chunk. What that cost is and what that breakdown is from federal grants, state grants that our workers have to probably fight to get in filling out paperwork, and then what it looks like locally. Doesn't need to happen like, it's one of those things that would be nice to have in future presentations when we're talking about the education of our children, that we have these groups. I would love to see the pie chart on this is this group of students, this is how much we get from a 1999 funding source. And here's where, somebody might have it, the pie chart would look funny from 1999 of what that looked like percent-wise at that time, educating that child, and what it is to today. We know what that's going to look like. But how much it comes down to us picking up the gap that has been created by these grants that look great until you read the fine print that says it's funded at fiscal year 1997 or fiscal year 1999. I know you're like, well, yes, this is what we work in. We know these things, but the general public doesn't. The general public says, oh, well, you get that money because it's a line item, and you get that money from the government. Right? Yes. And everything's changed in price since 1997 and 1999. So thank you for making sure that was a bullet point, and thank you for your smile when I asked the question.
That is
I'm always the person that says, wait a second, I'll call out the state and the feds for some reason not going back to anything they ever put into place and saying, oh, we should adjust this to today's numbers, because they know they don't want to do that, because then they would have to tax people differently, and they'd rather us tax people differently. So thank you.
Yes, we will try to see what we can put together, but at least that's better than the QBE formula, so.
We got jokes. I like it.
That's sad.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I did have a quick
Yes,
question.
Ms. Grabowski.
Just going back to your very first page, and I appreciate that you highlighted in yellow that we have to put together the special education-related services plan, including for students with whom we have zero interaction in private schools, home schools, and jails. Am I understanding that correctly? And how does that work?
Yes, so we do have the responsibility to provide like a level of education to those students. So similar to when Missy was talking about title, for special education, we have proportionate share and equitable services. So we do have to have like a timely and meaningful consultation with private schools and parents of homeschool children that are in our, it's not even our LEA, but in our like geographical area, which, our county. And kind of let them know what services we are able to offer to their students. So we don't have the same responsibilities that we have for our own students. Like we don't have the responsibility to provide FAPE to private school or homeschool students, but we do have to offer those equitable services, and they can either opt in or not. And there's like a designated amount that's set aside for that. For students in the local jail, technically we do have the responsibility to provide FAPE. However, that obviously would look different than, what we would see in our schools or even in public schools or homeschool.
Okay. So if the schools or homeschool parents opt out, is that simply included in that report that those schools have opted out?
It is something that we, would have to, maintain documentation of that. It doesn't change the level of funding that we have that's allocated. So it just kind of keeps like rolling over if we don't meet that.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Howard Hall?
Yes, thanks for your presentation. It'll be interesting to have a pie chart to see the percentages of disabilities. For example, what percentages are enrolled in speech, or maybe have math, just different disabilities to get an overall view of, because when people see disabilities, sometimes it's speech, speech impaired, and the percentage may look pretty high for a certain population of students, if basically it's speech, or just to kind of get an overall look, because I know there are so many different disabilities, but it would be interesting to see a pie chart to show the percentages of those disabilities, maybe grade span or overall.
Mr. Johnson?
So kind of piggyback on what Dr. Howard Hall said, I would also be interested to see what percentage of students has multiple disabilities. The reason being is because when I was growing up, I had multiple disabilities. I mean, I had a speech impediment as well as ADD. So I think that just to show the public how many students, not just how many students have disabilities and what kind of disabilities, but how many have multiple disabilities, because that affects a child's learning, a child's confidence, and everything else. So I think that's, those of us who are data nerds, we like to have as much data as possible. So that would be
Got data,
appreciated.
SPED's got data.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Keener. Any comments from Superintendent? Anybody else? Well, I will close our meeting. For everybody out there, come on back. We're having a budget hearing at 6 p.m. It'll be a blast. And if you want to head to the Macy Center for May Day, you too can run around the pole. Meeting adjourned.